Are you tired of spending your time and money chasing strategy after strategy only to discover what worked 10, 5, or even 2 years ago is not working now? Things shift fast in the online space, and if you're not keeping up, you're getting left behind. It's time for something different. Welcome to the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast, where every single episode will be jam-packed with proven, profitable strategies, behind-the-scenes secrets, and what's working now resources from industry experts and global influencers to help you scale your business, shorten your learning curve, and stand out in a crowded, noisy marketplace. And now, your host, award-winning marketing and media strategist, and international speaker, Patty Farmer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast. I'm your host, Patty Farmer, and I am looking forward to sharing another amazing industry expert with you today. And let me tell you, today is going to be a marketing day for sure, because we are going to deep dive into marketing metrics, and I think that's really important. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest. After spending too many years in corporate America, Lorraine said goodbye to the bureaucracy, glass ceilings, and bad coffee. Today, you can find her at Round Peg, a digital agency building smart strategies for businesses who want to use internet marketing to grow. Lorraine is an author, professional speaker, and the host of More Than a Few Words, a weekly marketing conversation. Lorraine brings creative ideas, practical tips, and decades of real-world experience to every conversation. She's a teacher at heart, but she launched the Digital Toolbox, an online learning community for new and growing small businesses. So we have a lot to talk about today. Thank you so much, Lorraine, for being here with me today.
Thank you, Patty. It is really going to be a fun conversation.
I know, and I'm really excited. So let's just jump on in. So before we start talking about marketing metrics, I kind of like to call that also marketing math. Let's kind of dive in a little bit about your story. So can you tell us a little bit about your story, your journey to where you got to where you are now, and maybe one or two aha moments you had along the way?
Okay, so I've been doing this a really long time, so there's lots of aha moments, but the first really big one was when I was in grad school and I was going to be an accountant. And anybody who knows me finds that incredibly funny. But I'm a numbers geek. And so when my professor said to me, you really should think about marketing, I was like, marketing, people make that stuff up. And she explained to me that good marketing was all about the numbers, that if you do marketing without paying attention to the numbers, you end up with award-winning advertising that doesn't sell product. And so that really began my marketing journey. I majored in marketing. I was a product manager. I've worked for large corporations. I worked for Linux Industries and Carrier, and I ran dealer programs and worked for a company called Conseco. And there was this moment where I woke up and I went, this is just not any fun. And I can do more for companies if I'm doing it on my own way. And that's really where Round Peg started. We started as a marketing consulting firm. We've always had this focus on strategy and metrics. And then one day along came the internet and we were like, this is cool. Because suddenly we had an opportunity to get real-time feedback on our marketing. We weren't just sending direct mail. I could send an email and see who opened it. And that was really kind of this next iteration of my company, Round Peg, where we made the shift, jumped full bore into digital marketing. And the company is 18 years old, so we started long before there was a Facebook or a LinkedIn, but that's really a big part of who we are today. So that's kind of us.
I love that. And I think that sometimes along that journey that we're talking about, we hit a few roadblocks, right? We have some obstacles or blind spots. And I really like to say sometimes we just downright get in our own way. What were some of the things that actually got in your way or maybe took you the longest to learn?
Oh, one of the things that I think really took me a while to learn was figuring out that not everybody was my customer. And really, on the one hand, I had been teaching that for a really long time, but really getting to that moment where I embraced and said, you know what? You're a good prospect for me, and you are not. And really living that. I was trying to straddle the fence between small clients and big clients. And when I finally realized that my sweet spot was companies 10 to 50 employees or 5 to 50 employees, then I called a friend of mine and I said, I've got a prospect list and I'm going to send it to you. And she was like, why? And I said, because I don't want to work with these people. And that was a game changer for me, just in terms of letting go and freeing myself up to concentrate. Clearly, I've been through a couple of different economic downturns, so those were certainly challenging. And learning to develop products that would be recession-proof. And that was one of the things with the digital toolbox, was making that shift so that we had a product that would continue to be valuable to our customers and also generate revenue for us no matter what happened. And quite honestly, I could not have foreseen this, but it is nice to have an online training portal right now.
Absolutely, right? Timing is really important. And I think that really asking yourself some of those questions of who is your client is really important. You know, Lorraine, a similar thing happened to me too that I'll share briefly, which was basically I had a coach. Well, we always have a coach, right? Coaches have coaches. But particularly, I was having this issue with not being able to sleep at nighttime. I found myself waking up in the middle of the night and, thinking about all these things. And I tried like everything. And I mentioned it to my coach and she said, well, kind of tell me what your day looks like. And she helped me to realize that what I was doing was that before I stopped for the day, I looked at my calendar to see what my next day was going to be, right? So I could be prepared. And so I was working in my sleep.
Oh, my goodness.
And that really was an eye-opener. But the bigger eye-opener, which I thought was interesting, which leads to what you were saying, is that sometimes, serendipitous things happen, right? So she told me that I needed to not look at my calendar until I had coffee the next day. So I had to stop doing that. And so that was an exercise she gave me, which really worked too, by the way. But it did a separate thing. What would happen and what became clear to me is in the morning when I would have my coffee, I would open up my calendar. And I have to tell you, within 3 days, I realized that probably shouldn't even have took me 3 days. But I looked at my calendar and I found when I was looking at who I was working with that day, that sometimes I went, oh, and I was really excited. And sometimes I went, oh, and I wasn't so excited. And I hadn't noticed it before, but this exercise she gave me made me realize it. And so I thought to myself, you know what? I only want to work with clients that make me be excited and not ever work with a client that makes me go, oh, right? And so that was kind of just serendipitous right there. But it was a clear exercise for me. Now I sleep better and I only work with clients that bring me joy. So I think that sometimes you have to have those aha moments and you really need to realize that while you think you may possibly be able to help everybody in some way, shape, or form, it doesn't mean they're your client. And I think that's really, really important. I also think the second question I think it's important to ask is, what is the problem that you solve for your ideal client? And a lot of times people don't get really clear on that. And you'll really get it because we're in marketing, right? So when you're in marketing, we have a huge umbrella, right? And so what you can do, right, could be broad, really broad, right? So really, getting in there about what is the problem you actually solve. So I really love that, which is why I asked you to be here, because I really wanted to dive into this marketing metrics. I think it's something that people don't always talk about, right? If you can't measure it, right, you have to be able to measure it. So one of the things that I think I want to ask you about first when we're diving into marketing metrics, and I hope everybody has their pen and paper out, is that I find that metrics kind of fall into categories. So what are some of the categories that you feel that when you're paying attention to metrics, what would you say are some of the categories?
So really, you should be looking at your metrics kind of like you look at your sales funnel. There are some numbers that tell you, do you have enough leads coming in? There are some metrics that tell you, are you kind of in that middle stage where you're engaging in prospects, and are you having enough of the right kind of conversations? Are you moving people through your sales funnel? There are metrics that tell you that you're doing a good job of selling. And then there are metrics that'll help you identify, are you actually doing a good job of retaining business? And so as you're looking at your different metrics, one of the things that you really want to do is also look at your business and ask yourself, where do I need to be focusing my attention? Because depending on where your business is at any given time, maybe you need to be focusing a lot on lead generation. But if you've got a lot of leads coming in and you've got a lot of traffic to your website and a lot of people are liking your Facebook page and nobody is filling out your contact forms, then you really need to be looking at the metrics in the middle of your funnel that tell you that how you're doing with conversion. Does that make sense?
Totally. And I also kind of think that when you're thinking about categories, I kind of think of like attraction, engagement, lead generation, and loyalty, right? Because there's a lot of things. And I think a lot of times when people are talking about their email list, a lot of times they just think, oh, what can I do to get people to subscribe? Now, for me, one of the things I like to work on my clients with is you really need to nurture. And you have to have a nurture campaign, because the reality is people can unsubscribe just as easy as they can subscribe, actually more so. So like you said, attracting the client is one thing, retaining the client is the other. So, what are your stick strategies that you have in place to get them to stay? So I think that is really important. And I really like the idea, for people to really understand that there are actually metrics in place to tell you. But the number one thing that you said that I really want to ask you to define for my audience, I could do it, but I really want you to do it because I love when I have marketing people on the show, because we always get a different perspective. And I think that's good for people, is you actually said sales funnel and marketing funnel. And I think a lot of people think they're exactly the same thing. You and I both know that they're not the same thing at all. Is really, it's kind of like they're two separate things and they need to be treated separately. So just for the sake of the audience, will you help them to understand from your point of view what the difference is between a marketing funnel and a sales funnel?
So the role of marketing is to drive qualified leads to your business. The role of sales is to convert those leads, and then marketing picks up again on the back end in what you call that loyalty phase. Sometimes I refer to that as the delight phase. So the marketing funnel really looks at how many people are you reaching, how many people are engaging, how many people are putting their hand up and saying, hey, I'm interested. The sales funnel really looks at the sales process from the time the person puts up their hand and says, I'm interested. What are the steps in your business? Now, in some businesses, from the moment the person puts their hand up to the moment they buy is really very small. But in other businesses, there are a number of touches that have to happen along the way as someone gathers quotes, considers multiple possibilities. And that's really more the sales funnel. The sales funnel ends with the contract, with the person signing on the dotted line. But then, as I said, that marketing funnel actually kind of picks back up, because now you have to have that process, as you said, to stay in touch with, to re-engage, to ask for a review, to ask for a recommendation, and start that process again. I'm an old school marketing girl, and we were taught that sales is a subset of marketing. So the marketing funnel is soup to nuts, and the sales is the middle piece.
Oh, I love that. That is a very good perspective. And I think it's a really good lens for people to look at, because they don't always realize it, right? And one of the biggest roles here in both of them, so the one thing that really falls into both of them, is the relationships that you build. Relationships are important in your marketing funnel as well as your sales funnel. They may be treated a little bit differently, But the reality really is they are crucial actually to both.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can't measure everything, I mean, like somebody could just like totally get caught up in that. Like I know sometimes I have clients who will like totally fixate on their open rate or something, and they never pay any attention to their click-throughs, or they worry about, you know, how many bounces they got. I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, you could just get all caught up in that and never serve your client and just look at numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can't measure absolutely everything, but I think there's kind of a trick. What do you think the trick is?
So I think you need to match what you're measuring to what your objectives are. What, as I said earlier, kind of what are you really focused on? If you feel like your phone's not ringing, if there are not enough leads, then you want to be at the very top of your pipeline. You want to be looking at your web traffic. You want to be looking at web traffic from all the different sources so you can figure out what's working and what's not working. Is your organic and SEO, are those numbers going up, but your direct going down? Well, now you can build an action plan that says, well, I want to increase my direct traffic. I need to get out into the real world. I need to be visible in 3 dimensions. So when people move from the real world back online, they're thinking about me as they go. Other ways that you can focus on attraction is what's going on your social communities. And again, there is a selectivity in the numbers. And we just had this huge epiphany recently. I track all my different social media profiles and I know where I am on all of them. And we woke up one morning and we went, you know what? Nobody really cares about our LinkedIn company updates. They pay attention to the Lorraine Ball updates, but they don't pay attention to the company. So instead of making ourselves crazy because we're sharing and we're agonizing, we're like, okay, if that really isn't going to work, what is working? And for us, surprisingly, Pinterest was blowing up. And so looking at the metrics gave us an opportunity to make a really good decision on how to switch and how to shift our resources to focus on the things that are really working.
And I think that, you know, based on what you're saying, which I totally agree, that's why really tracking the metrics is important, because sometimes you have to pivot, right? Mm-hmm. You know, there's times that you really have to shift and pivot. And like for me, one of the things that's kind of amazing for me is that the 4th month now, that I'm really like super uber focused on Pinterest, right? For business. Mm-hmm. And I have to tell you, my numbers have gone from 14.4 thousand, which isn't too bad. I looked this morning to 183,000 in 3 months, mm-hmm. right? You know, and mostly because I'm being really paying more attention. You know, I, have a great automation tool for that. For some things I'm, paying attention to the tribes they have there, which are kind of like Facebook groups. But I think that there's things that you can look at, and you're right, because a lot of times in social media, you can't quantify that, right? There's not so easy to quantify, but it is really looking about where you're getting traction. So I have to tell you, people say to me all the time, Lorraine, they say, oh, I don't even get on Twitter. And I always laugh because Twitter is really the one social media platform that isn't two-way. It's a one-way. You have to earn it. You don't become friends and now you're friends. You don't follow and now you follow. You can, follow somebody on Twitter. They don't have to follow you back. So you really have to earn it. And I have to tell you, I track this all the time. And right now, 76% of my closed business, that's sales, originates on Twitter.
Wow.
I've never sold a thing on Twitter. I have a strong community there, but I have a good community on all my social media platforms, but Twitter really works for me. The key word there was originates, right? Mm-hmm. And then you move it to where it needs to go to continue the conversation based on that. So it cracks me up when people say, oh, I'm not even on Twitter. I'm like, okay, because for me, I feel for my business that Twitter is the best lead generation tool I have ever used. Hands down, I actually teach lessons on just that. But I think it's different for everybody. But if you don't track those metrics, like you wouldn't know it. And I 100% agree with you. I find that I get much more traction on my Facebook personal wall and in my groups than I do on my business page. I think most people do now. And so you just have to know where to spend time and where to track. So what would you say, like, I think that kind of the trick is to just pick 3 to 5 numbers that you're going to look at, right?
Right.
And just kind of to track them. So let's kind of talk about that. So if you were just going to pick 3 to 5, do you have a certain 3 to 5 that you think are the ones they should be looking at first or that are the most important? Or do you think, like, I think it kind of depends upon their business, but as a general rule.
Well, as a general rule, what I think traffic sources more than traffic. I mean, obviously, you want to have traffic, but like you said, your Pinterest engagement went from 14,000 to 100,000. That's great. But the other number that I want to know is how many of those people came over to your, and again, you touched on that word originate. The traffic originates there, but your web is your home base. So how much
your website is your home base. Like, I love it when people want to say, even when I ask people how to connect and they tell you all these different things, and I'm driving people to my social media. I'm like, no, social media is a tool. Everything should be happening on your website. That is the hub. Everything, all roads lead to that.
Yes. So I always look at my traffic sources because that data is actionable. The traffic number just makes you feel good or bad, but it doesn't. That's the other part of the metric. There needs to be an action component.
Absolutely.
It's great that I have this number. So the action. If you're going to get an email, if you're going to send email, then I really think between the two numbers, I want to look at your clicks, not your open rate. Because again, you can play games with your open rate depending on how narrowly you focus your list. And, my emails get a 40% open rate. That's because I stopped sending emails to people who don't open. But how good is an individual campaign? That's the click rate. And, when I see 2 to 3% click, that tells me that I haven't done a good job of delivering on the promise I made when I sent the email.
Absolutely. And I love that because I know that when I go back on my Pinterest, I'll just use that because I already said it. When I looked at in the past 3 months, my click rate has gone up over 306% and my follow rate has gone up 128%. So it is really about looking at those, but it really is like, how is that converting? Like how, so really what you're pinning to, but also like what you're saying about the ones that you're looking at when you're talking about your email, getting uber focused on who it is, which I think for me, and this is a little bit of a deviation, but it is marketing metrics, is really all about segmenting, right? I think really the number one thing that I think for me has been segmenting every single thing I do and then vetting it all the time. Like I clean it up like twice a year to make sure, because you're right, if people are on your list and they're not even opening them, it really kind of makes a difference. And for example, so this is the Marketing Media Money podcast, but everybody knows I also have the Marketing Media Money magazine. Just last Monday, we hit 80,000 subscribers.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But even with that, I'm uber focused on what I send them because that's what they subscribe to. That doesn't mean they want to hear about where I'm speaking and all this other stuff unless they also opted into something that has to do with that. So I think being really clean and segmenting your list and then honoring people and sending them only what consistently sending them relevant information is what's really important, and it'll get you truer numbers. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because then you can really see, okay, among people who are interested, was this interesting? So it forces you to up your game as well. You had asked me about giving you 3 metrics, and I gave you 2. The first was traffic sources. The second was click rates on your email. The third one is in the lead gen category, and it is submissions on your website. And that may be contact forms, subscriptions to your email, or if you have an offer where people can give you their email address and in exchange for some piece of gated content. All of those, however you're collecting and growing your community and getting people to self-select and opt in, to me, that's the third metric you should be paying attention to.
I love that. And I think it's really important. I think it's something that people don't pay as much attention to as they should. They think, oh, well, tracking metrics is like busy work, right? But you really need to know numbers, because how can you drive change in your strategy or tweak things? And, that's why A/B testing is so good. Sometimes it's changing a subject line. I mean, it could be anything, right? And so I think that knowing that, I really love that you say traffic sources. I have to tell you, I have a lot of marketing people on my show. That's the first time somebody has actually said that. I really believe in that. And I think it's super, super important. Nobody else has ever said it. So kudos to you. I really love that. I'm excited because I love having marketing people on the show. And I love it when it's just kind of like, I feel like the listeners, it's just such a much more dynamic conversation because, we really get it, right? And so I think that not all metrics are created equal, right? There's a lot of things, right? But really, honestly, you can't measure everything, but not all metrics are created equal. So I really think it is important to know what metrics that you are going to choose to really pay attention to. And you should pay attention to all your metrics, but like, I think when you say that, like some of them you want to pay attention a whole lot more often, like daily, and which ones should you do weekly and quarterly or whatever, because so that you can make those changes, right?
Absolutely. And if I can give you two quick tips on selecting metrics and sort of approaching this whole topic of metrics. And the first is to track consistently. That the longer you collect data, the more valuable and projectionable the data becomes. So I have some things that I have tracked in my business for a decade. I know exactly when things are going to blip, and I also know when that goes down, what's going to happen to my sales cycle, etc. So it becomes a very projectionable metric. And the second thing that I think people often screw up when it comes to, or often mess up when it comes to metrics and evaluating their numbers, is you have to look at year over year, not period over period. So a lot of times people will compare February to March or April to May, but most of us have seasonal businesses. I came out of the HVAC industry, and that's a very seasonal business. If you hire me on June 1, I'm going to look like a hero on July 1 because everything goes up in the summer. If you hire me on September 1, I'm going to look like an idiot. But it's not a valid comparison. You need to compare June this year to June last year. And even businesses that think they aren't necessarily seasonal, there is a seasonality to your business. Things either get quiet or busy in December. Marketing and health clubs do really well in January because people make New Year's resolutions. I'm going to do something different this year. And so that consistency and also that year over year evaluation is really the only way to get a true picture of what your business is and how it's really doing.
I love that. So Lorraine, if somebody was a brand new entrepreneur, so for that, it could be somebody, transitioning out of corporate, or maybe they just bought a brand new business, brick and mortar, or they just kind of like transitioned into entrepreneurship from a job, whichever one of those, or all of those, right? But what would your advice be if they were brand new and now all of a sudden, right, we all know now they're doing it. What would your advice be on the first things, because you can't super overwhelm them, right? What would be the things that you would tell them that they need to pay attention to and have in place first?
I think that the first thing they have to do is they have to have a website, because I think everything in marketing in this day and age begins and ends with your website. It is the brochure you don't have to print because you can tell them, go to my website. It is the credibility statement when somebody meets you and they hop over to LinkedIn and they're looking for more information. So I would say step number one, it doesn't have to be elaborate. It doesn't have to be 50 pages, but you have to have a website, and you have to install on day number one the analytics that will tell you, is anybody coming? And then depending on your business and the kind of marketing that you start doing, you want to have other things in place. Something else that I tracked early on that I don't track as well anymore, but I was meeting a lot of people. When I started the business, I had contacts all over the country, but I had 59 people in Indianapolis that I really felt I could talk to about my business. And I started tracking, creating like a tree of who introduced me to who. So every time I met someone, I would sort of, in their customer record, identify how I met them, how they found me. That helped me decide which networking events I should go to, because when I realized I had 500 people in my database that were all tagged Rainmakers and Tony Celzo, I'm like, I got to hang out with him more often. And when I looked at my database and I realized that there was nobody on there from the National Association of Women Business Owners at that time, as much as I really enjoyed the events, I realized it wasn't as good a use of my time. So wherever you're going initially to build your business, are you going to social media? Measure social. Are you going to networking events? Measure the networking. But all of that begins and ends with your website.
I love that. I think that really makes a lot of sense because it really tells people what they really need to look at. And it's where you're going to gather the most data. And in the age that we're at right now, data is so important. I mean, not just as somebody who does marketing, but as a speaker and somebody who publishes a magazine, like even our podcast, there's times that we're looking for sponsors, right? Or somebody who might want to purchase ads in my magazine. They want data, right? And they want to be able to know. And so this is the way that when you measure, you can give them the data that they need so that they can make a decision. I mean, if you can go out and say, oh yeah, well, I have this many of this, but then the question is, does it meet what they're looking for? And so the more data you have, and you're going to get that by analyzing things, and you always should start with your website. So I think that is really, really important. And you have given us a lot of really good information, and I really appreciate that. So Lorraine, how can people connect with you?
The best way to start is go to roundpeg.biz. That's our agency website, and all of our other resources are connected from there.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that because it's just like what you said. That's your hub, and everything you can be found there. So I love, Lorraine, that you came bearing gifts. So could you tell us a little bit about this gift? Because I think this is like a no-brainer. Everybody should go and get it right now gift. So go ahead and tell them a little bit about what they can expect to get with that gift.
So the Digital Toolbox is our online training community, and there is both a paid and a free version. And the free version includes webinars and white papers and resources and tech tips. And all you have to do is go and log in. And I think you said there'll be a link to the Digital Toolbox in the show notes.
Absolutely. I like to make things nice and easy. I went and looked at it this morning, and it looks very, very good. And that's why I'm telling people you want to be able to go and get that. So I think that's really fabulous. So now we come to the portion of the show that I love. This is called #OpenMic, where I hand the mic over to our guests, kind of my version of social karaoke. And can you tell us what is this is the Marketing, Media, Money show, right? So what is your number one marketing, media, or money strategy?
Number one strategy is to have a very specific objective for everything that you spend money or resources on. If you don't have a specific objective, how are you going to know if what you did worked?
Ooh, I mean, really, that is so good, right? I mean, like, how can they make any type of adjustments, whether it's to their budget, their time, their resources, right? I think that's really important. That is a great tip. I hope everybody wrote that down. So Lorraine, thank you so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you being so generous with your zone of genius. So thank you so much.
Patty, thank you. This was so much fun. It was such a great conversation.
I love that. And to the audience, thank you so much for listening to the Marketing, Media, and Money podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and review the podcast on your favorite listening platform. And make sure to join us on Facebook in the Marketing, Media, and Money Magazine podcast and events Facebook group. Make sure to connect with our amazing guest. Grab her free resource that she has for you, and we will see you next time on the Marketing, Media, and Money podcast. Make it a phenomenal day, and remember, if your day isn't phenomenal, you have the power to change it.
Thank you for joining us today on the Marketing, Media, and Money podcast. To shorten your learning curve even more, make sure to grab your free copy of the Marketing, Media, and Money magazine at www.marketingmediamoney.com. I promise your business will thank you.